Okay, so this is Christina Luce again, and this is Art History 497X, and we are just getting through Introduction to For Loops in JavaScript, and we have now done the for loops, the basics, the practicing loops, and we are just getting started with arrays and loops down here. This section gets a little bit complicated, and so I'm just going to get us through the first three exercises, and then we can kind of work through the last three exercises together. I think that's actually a really good, those last scripts are a really good place for us to kind of work collectively. So these are just the introductions so that you can understand arrays. Let me just reset my code here. Arrays are a special type of variable. You notice that that variable command is very important. And in some cases, it's so important, it's so basic that we don't actually use it, but it's just a good kind of practice to keep us thinking, to go ahead and keep using that. So an array is a special type of variable. You know it's an array when you see those hard brackets, but other than that, it functions just like a regular variable does. So you start out with the var command, or the var keyword, var, and then you add the name of what you're going to be calling your array, and then the equal sign. So to that extent, it's sort of very much like just a regular variable, and then you've got those brackets that basically show you that you're putting in more than just one data type at a time, or one piece of data at a time. So here you're just practicing the creation of an array and understanding that syntax. And you do it, as I said, just like any other variable. So you start with the var command, and then your instructions say to call this array junk. So the var command comes first, and then the word that you're going to be using to name what this array is called, junk. And we have the equal sign, and then the hard brackets. Whoops, not the curly brackets, the hard brackets, or hard braces there. And then what it says is to put 4 bits of data into our array. The first 2 should be strings, and the second 2 should be numbers. And so I just used the title of the course. Don't forget your quotes. I'm apt to do that. So we have art, history. Notice you need to put commas between each one of these pieces of data. That comma is very important. And then we don't have 2 different numbers, so I just broke that up into 4 and then 97. So that's our array. And then you want to end it with a semicolon, and then we want to print it out. So we have console.log, and then junk, just like that. Let's make sure we've done all those instructions. Yeah. So what do you think this is going to print out? Something just to think about there for a second first. Did you think it was going to print like that? The key there is to note that you are basically calling for the full array when you call for junk, and so you get the brackets and all 4 data types. Okay, so we're going on to the next lesson, and this next lesson is for you to understand why arrays are important in a sense, and that is because the data gets put into envelopes or mailboxes, if you want to think about it as like in your dorm when you've got everyone's mailbox. An array works just like that. So it's got all of the different letters in it, but what you want to know is what slot those letters belong in. And so the tricky thing, I'm just going to reset the code there. The tricky thing here is that just like bit strings, if you remember before when you were trying to pull, for instance, Mel out of Melbourne, the tricky thing was how the computer indexes those slots or those spaces or those places. And unlike sort of intuitive human logic where you would start with 1, the computer starts with 0. So you're just in that exact same situation here. The length of the array junk data, the length of it is 4 because there are 4 positions, but the numbers or the labels for those positions are 0, 1, 2, 3. A little illogical, but that's just how the computer views the logic. Okay, so in this case you want to print out the 4th element of the array, which is a little bit similar to that last command that we had. If you remember the last command, we just used the console.log, and then we said junk. In this case, we're going to do the same thing, only we're adding one little bit of information because we don't want to print out everything, we just want the last part, And so you're basically needing to key out which slot in the array you want to print. You do that with the hard braces, and you want it to print the fourth slot, so that has the index number of 3, just like that. And then you say submit code, and there is your correct answer. Okay, and now we start to get a little bit more complicated. So we've got the idea here that you're going to connect loops and arrays together. And why might this be important? Loops and arrays work well together because a loop will go through systematically that array for you. And so that's kind of important. And so what we have here is an array called cities. It has 4 cities in it. And you are basically working through that idea that we had before with loops in order to do it. So if we try to read this loop, what you have is start with 0. And if 0 is less than the length of the array cities, that's what that command, that we recognize that command, but it's doing something slightly different when it's talking about an array. It's not telling you how many letters in the string, it's telling you how many slots in the array. When you look at that, then it says there are 4 slots, right? So if I is less than 4, add 1 to it. But before you do that iteration, if this conditional is true, type I would like to visit, and then put whatever slot we're talking about in there, right? So that's pretty simple. What the instructions say to do is to go ahead and change these cities. So we'll just put in Washington cities. How about that? Bellingham, of course, Seattle. Put in as many as we like. So how about Tacoma? How about Yakima? What are some others? How about Bow? Sort of a little city, right? Okay, and so run the loop and see them all printed out. So let's just look at our loop here. So we have 4 our counting variable I. For I is equal to 1, as long as I is less than the city length, which in this case will be 5. Print I would like to visit whichever city you're on. Then go back and iterate and check and see if the conditional still holds true. So we should have an ending loop. Everything should be fine. And there we go. We printed all of our cities. Okay, so far so good. It gets a little challenging after this. We'll see how we do with that lesson when we do it together as a class. Okay, thanks so much.